Hello, everyone. I am Gabby, and I'm a DX engineer here at Vercel. And today I am here with Chris, the creator of OmniLens. Chris, do you want to say hello and tell us where you're tuning in from?
Hello, everyone. Hey, Gabby. Yes, I'm Christopher, but you can call me Chris, and I'm tuning in from South Africa. It is 7:30 in the evening right now.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much for hopping on today, and I'm super excited to chat.
Mhm.
Before we get into OmniLens, I want to know more about you because you have an interesting background. You're a QA, and I think that's super cool because I feel like with open source contributors, you have a lot of devs, and then you have a lot of like businessy startup founder folks, but not a lot of QA folks. So,
Yeah.
what was your pathway getting into QA, and how did you start contributing to open source?
Yeah, it's been a 11-year journey at this point, and it's been quite interesting. So I actually come from a retail background. I never studied or went to university, but I got pretty bored with the retail space and found myself doing QA at a fintech, and I ended up spending my about 5 years there. And that's where I learned everything I needed to, from manual testing to automation testing, performance testing. At that point, physical hardware with servers. It was, like I said, fintech, so very heavily based in security. And after that, I ended up working for a couple of startups. At one point, I worked for a company where I was working for two or three startups at once, and that really, taught me how to hone my skill set and kind of make sure I'm applying the right amount of effort where I need to serve the business. And yeah, currently I'm working at another big corporate, and during this kind of transition from corporate to startup, AI and things started spinning up. And there was a very specific point where a CTO of mine said, "Hey, download Cursor, give it a go, and see what it does."
Mhm.
And it's been 2 years since that point, and I never really thought I'd be building anything, to be completely honest. But I'm at a point now where I find gaps for tools, I build them, and OmniLens was one of those tools that kind of hit me in the face one morning. I very clearly remember it was 10 o'clock on a Sunday, and I worked till 4 in the morning. And yeah, it's been just foot on the gas ever since.
Yeah, I love that. So I think that it's super cool that you worked fractionally for different startups and in corporate because those are just such different environments. And I'm sure that like all of the different like use cases and pain points, they looked so different. And I'm sure that in those environments, you were using different tools, right? So there are tools like Jenkins and GitHub Actions. So can you tell me with OmniLens, how is OmniLens different than those tools, or what is it solving that maybe you saw that those tools weren't doing a great job with?
Yeah, so currently, right now, OmniLens just supports GitHub. There are plans to kind of venture into GitLab at some point, but
Mhm.
majority of open source repos live on GitHub. So it's inevitable that actions will be used, whether you're using GitHub's own actions themselves or you use Blacksmith or Tenki for your runner. Like, actions are here to stay, right? And I come from a background where the actions are very important, and I just found myself getting stuck with the UI that GitHub displays. There's no real filtering and sorting. It's very hard to kind of surface the type of metrics a QA needs to provide. I'm asked, can we release? Have we regressed? Are we consistent or healthy? These aren't metrics that are native to the GitHub platform,
Yeah.
and very specific to the QA language, if I can put it that way. So OmniLens was kind of born out of that idea to make that more tangible to people. And if you consider the open source space, you
Mhm.
know, I don't know how many people write tests or use actions to run tests, but having some sort of signal that things are good every morning and that you're not on fire and that your users are struggling is
Yeah.
is always a good way to sense check your product. Yeah. So that's kind of what it solves.
Yeah, I love that. So I love that that's the problem that we're solving with OmniLens. Do you want to do a demo and show us what it looks like? Because a little
Yeah,
bird told me you've made some updates to your site.
I have. So I've been very, very, very busy rebuilding OmniLens. So we've kind of gone for a completely new look. So those of you, shout out to my 36 users right now. Those of you who use the app are going to be in a big surprise today. So we've kind of done a complete rebrand, but this kind of shows you more or less what your dashboard would look like and kind of talks about the core capabilities of OmniLens. The first one is repo management. You have to put your repo in. The repos are the source of truth. We then ingest all the signals and give you metrics that kind of help you stay up to beat with your application and how things are going from an actions point of view. and it's free. So if you're an open source contributor, if you have never worked in open source before, all you need to do is sign up with your GitHub account. It's free, and you will basically be able to use the app. So as we log in, you'll see that a number of repositories already exist. So here's a really great use case for OmniLens. These are my friends. They all build in the open source community, and I care deeply about their products. This immediately lets me see that how people are doing, their success rate, how many runs they have, and so on. So just to show you what OmniLens would look like if we actually add that in. So what we do is we first validate that the repo exists. That's obviously very important. We then add it to the dashboard and then get all your workflow data. And here you can see OmniLens was added. Right now, quite proud of this, but we have not regressed since I started building this application on Friday. Yes. So let's actually go into the new UI. So the first thing you're going to land on is your repository dashboard. And this is your like command center for everything your workflow has, right? So from the very top, you can immediately see that you're healthy. Nothing is red, as you can see. Everything is green, and it makes you feel very calm and collected, right? But you can see here, overview has some really nice stats that give you information like what is your average runtime, how many workflows you have. You can imagine in a world where you have quite a large application and you have a large suite of tests, your runtime is quite important. If this is sitting in an hour, you're going to struggle, right? That's no one wants to wait an hour to find out their work is functional. So this kind of gives you those signals at the very first step. You can also see the activity. I have tests running every day. We can jump back to yesterday. Yesterday was quite a busy day, and you can kind of see when I worked, how long I worked for. You can see here are all the tests that ran. You can see the workflows here on the side, which ones are active, which ones are idle, and like their kind of states. So if we go into health, for example, now we're going into a workflow itself. And again, all of this information is in GitHub. It's just not surfaced in a way that is actually readable and usable. Yeah. So if someone were to say, hey, Chris, how are health tests doing? I can tell them they're consistent. We can see here that the last 5 runs today, at least, have been green. The pass rate is 100%. And I even show you on the branches itself. So if you have multiple developers working on different features and they all need to run these tests, as a QA, I can immediately see, hey, this branch is struggling. This branch is doing really, really good. So that's quite fun. Little shout out to Nooks. Nooks is a very, very good guy in the open source community. And you can kind of see that as I kind of turn between the different pages and load the data, it does take a bit of time. But if I were to switch back, it just loads instantly. So shout out to them. I actually have their repo here, and they are doing great.
I love that.
Actually load up their stats. So yeah, other things that are aware of is that we have a nice changelog and blog if you're interested in taking a look.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so a couple of things to shout out here. So I love that a lot of the repos that you showed are other open source projects that are in Vercel's open source sponsorship program. So Marble, Notra, Nux, and I believe DataBuddy as well, all in our program. So can I ask, how has your experience in the open source community been? Because I always like to say this, open source is more than just like your code base being visible. It's also like the community, it's helping each other. It's this like free flow of information. So how has your like friendship and like relationship building in the open source community been?
It's been amazing. Honestly, I was looking back at, because OmniLens, I've only started building in September. I kind of look back at that journey, and I really can say I would not be sitting here having this session with you sharing OmniLens if it wasn't for people in the open source community. And I mean, I knew these guys before they even made it into the OSS program, which is insane, right? But getting in together as a team was really cool because we realized, wow, I can actually use my cohort's products, right? And I think that was very exciting about the cohort in itself is I use Marble for my blog. I use DataBuddy for my analytics. I'm using Nooks. I'm using Notra, so it really just made it tangible that, hey, OmniLens actually has users, and here they are because they are building in this space. And I really kind of looked to them for like influence because I felt like, or rather inspiration, because I felt like I can really build something that can help them understand how they're doing from a quality perspective and keep an eye on how things are going. So yeah. It's been great.
I love that. And I think that's one of my favorite things about open source and the community is that you meet so many great people who are building such cool things, and you get this like really unique opportunity to talk to these people. And there are products or projects that I feel like at the surface level, you wouldn't think there was any synergy or any way to collaborate. But like you just mentioned, you are talking to these people, being chronically online, which we love at Vercel, and making these connections. And I think that's one of the reasons why open source is so innovative and there's such like a rapid like iteration and feedback loop, is because you really are talking to your users. A lot of
Yeah.
times if it's a dev tool, right, those users are developers and they will give you really sometimes candid but useful feedback. So yeah, I love
100%.
that. Yeah, and I love that that's been your experience with the open source program. Very cool. And speaking of open source and QA, I recently had a conversation with someone who works in cybersecurity, and I was talking about how in the open source program, there are a lot of people who will vibe code and then they'll make this open source project. And when I told them that, it was like I told them that like people were like exposing like API keys or something. They were horrified, and they were really concerned about vibe coding and the implications that it would have on QA. So can you
Yeah.
talk to me about what do you think vibe coding, like what has the impact been on quality when it comes to code bases? And do you think it's something that disproportionately impacts the open source community?
That's a really good question. And I think any QA, currently alive right now is asking themselves that question because it has an impact on how we work and how we do things.
Mhm.
I would say the open source community doesn't really have an issue with quality. I don't think vibe coding in itself
Mhm.
creates bad quality. I
Mhm.
think, we hate to say it, but AI just enhances what we have. Like, so if
Mhm.
you're not particularly good at something, it might make it better, but it's not going to overall improve it unless you
Yeah.
really put time and effort, right? But I don't see it as a risk. I see it as more of an exciting new chapter because
Mhm.
as QAs, I used to wait 3 to 5 days for features to land,
Mhm.
at my desk, and then I take a couple of days to test it. And maybe you've got to fix some bugs, so it goes back. And we now live in a world where developers can spin up features in seconds, in minutes. Seconds is a bit crazy. I'd argue the quality on that is a bit bad, but the reality is no one is really coding by hand. We're all generating or prompting to some degree, and quality can get lost.
Mhm.
But I think there are lots of people in the open source community that care about quality, and
Mhm.
it's very clear when they talk on Twitter about the influx of PRs that are coming in and how that is affecting the overall development experience of maintaining open source. So
Mhm.
I think quality has different aspects in the open source space as well, and as it does naturally.
Yeah.
And we're just seeing certain parts of that getting inflamed. But
Yeah.
overall, I don't see it as a massive fire that we need to put out. Like,
Mhm.
it's here to stay, right? We can't flip the switch. It's not going away.
Mhm.
As QAs, we need to find ways to enable. How do we engineer quality in this new world and enable people to ship as fast as they want to,
Mhm.
while making sure that they don't break things and cause regressions and pain for the users, right? So
Yeah.
to me, it's exciting. I don't see it as fear mongering or dreading kind of the future. I see this as the thing that is the most exciting thing that we can tackle right now as QAs.
Yeah, definitely. And I love asking people what their, I guess, like perception or vibe is when it comes to AI, because you do have, I think there's definitely a binary, right? Of like fear mongering where people are like, oh my gosh, AI, we're going to be living in iRobot. AI is going to be running our society. And, there aren't going to be jobs for like devs and QA folks and things like that. Or there are people who are on the other end of the spectrum where they're like, oh, AI is like, it's just a fading trend. And it's, in 2030, we're going to forget it even happened. And Chat GPT is going to be like in the back of a dusty library. But I think the truth is somewhere that is, probably more moderate and in the middle of we care about these things. AI, like you said, exacerbates if there are maybe like deficits already there. So like if someone is building something and they don't understand the code base, that will be exacerbated. If there's someone who is very knowledgeable, that will be exacerbated. And I think that the future is agentic. meaning that devs and QA folks, project managers, anyone working in tech or really any field will not be replaced by AI, but rather they will be using AI and specifically agentic AI to do their jobs more effectively, right? Uh, and do you agree with that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I mean, I live in a world where, it's a struggle to keep up with everything that's going on constantly. But with the new technology that's coming out and things like skills is a really great example where I can document how I would do my manual testing process, and I can share that with my team and make that available to the agents that they use, whether that's in Cursor, it's in Claude Code, wherever it is. You can create a really nice directory of skills that shares the knowledge, because that's all you really have to do is enable other people to understand what are you doing and why, right? And agents are the same. They need the direction. And so I see a world where, you need to manually test something. Sure, someone will manually sit and test the application, but you will also spin up 4 different agents that are going in blind, going in some context. It's a returning user, a new user. There are so many possibilities. And I think that, I really encourage QA engineers to like really understand that this is enabling us to be better. It's not going to, I mean, in certain cases it might have an impact, but for those of us that grasp it and really kind of push ourselves forward to understand, there is an entire new world waiting for us where we can engineer quality to such a degree that it enables developers and their agents and whatever agentic workflows come in the future to build with quality. And that to me is extremely exciting. And I want OmniLens to be a part of that as well.
Yeah, I love that. And so it sounds like you're very bullish on an agentic future. So
Mhm.
something that I've noticed, right, from talking to different developers is that there is a workflow, right? That is like maybe they're using like Claudebot to like, or Claudebot or Claude to build a feature, and then they're using something like OmniLens to monitor it, and then using something like Greptile or CodeRabbit to review it and approve it and push it out. And there is very little human eyes in that workflow or in that process. So it's like someone prompts and then maybe like 15 minutes later, it's like pushed out. Um, I know that you're bullish, but does that scare you, right? That it's become that autonomous?
I don't see it as scary. Again, I'm very bullish, so maybe that's just my view. But I mean, the reality is, before AI, we had this problem as well, right? We had some way of code getting to a reviewer, and then there's questions, there's comments, there's bugs. The feedback loop is always going to be there, whether there's human or agents in the loop. I think that just the human intervention is going to be uh, might be less involved, but more critical, right? So, a lot of the tools nowadays, we get to that review stage, and that's where a human would naturally go and sit and review. Nowadays, we have that problem where you have thousands of PRs. OpenClaw has like, I think he said 4K PRs that he's like going through per day or some crazy like stat, right?
Yeah.
And that's a quality issue in itself, right? It's not the application is breaking. It's
Yeah.
somewhere in your product that there is a quality issue, right?
Yeah.
And it's here to stay, right? And I think that we are the correct people to kind of, as open source communities and stuff, to kind of drive those improvements and say, how can we make this better? How can we improve this experience so that, we can still use the tools we love, we can still use these workflows, but really make sure that things are of quality. And I mean, like, to me, that's vague but tangible at the same time, right? Quality is such a vague thing, but
Mhm.
you know it when you see it, right? And I think that's super important. So I
Mhm.
don't think it's an issue. I think that we just need to be aware of where the new risks are and understand how to mitigate them, because that's all it's ever going to be. Yeah, risk management.
Yeah, definitely. And I would love to kind of dig into this idea of like quality and application health, right? Because I
Yeah.
think for maybe the uninitiated or the unfamiliar, right, there's this idea of like, okay, I want my pass rate to be like 85, 90, 100%. And so like the board that you were going through was very healthy. It was a 100% pass rate. But can you talk about what
Yeah.
number should people be aiming for, if any? And is it different? Like if you're maybe building like an enterprise product versus, an open source project that has maybe like 200 or 300 users, how are those numbers different? And then what are the metrics and indicators of health that you should be paying attention to?
That's a really good question. I think code coverage and test coverage is such a difficult topic because it's very subjective and context driven. I think pretty much everything we do as QAs is driven by context. I can't give you accurate feedback or anything without understanding what we're talking about and what the context is, right? So I think that's important. And the reality is that numbers are, if you're aiming for code coverage, it's going to increase exponentially. You will never reach 100% because there will always be a unit test or an integration test or a feature test that is just not covered because of testability reasons or other things, right? But it's one of those things where you just have to manage those expectations. So what OmniLens does is it really surfaces those metrics in a way that makes sense to you as a user, whether you are a end user, a product manager, a developer, a security analyst, whatever. If I tell you something is healthy, giving you a 90% or a 95%, some people might have KPIs that really depend on that kind of number, but quality is subjective and context driven. So I would rather you say things have degraded or things have regressed, right? And those are the metrics that OmniLens surface. We will still tell you whether you have 100% pass rate or 20% pass rate. We will still give you a percentage if you need to communicate that. But it enables you to start encouraging the conversation to be more about health and about percentage, because what is a percentage? We have 80% coverage, but the app is broken. It's not a good metric, right? But if I can prove to you that it's degraded, that's an important conversation to have rather than a percentage.
Yeah. And a parallel that I really like to draw when it comes to application health is it's just like human health, right? Like if I went to the doctor and, I did a checkup and the doctor's just like, you're healthy, good to go. I think I would be a little bit disappointed by that. And I would have maybe like some deeper questions, right? Because what does that mean? Because like healthy for me, right, might be different than someone who is like 50 years older than me or someone who's like a toddler. So when we're talking about numbers, right, numbers are just numbers, right, until you have a context or story behind them. So just like when you go to the doctor, you want numbers, like you want to know like what your weight is or what your A1C blood sugar number is, what your blood pressure is. But you have to take all of those numbers together and like contextually think like, okay, like these are the numbers, but like, am I an athlete? Am I sleeping enough? Am I happy? Am I eating healthy? And I think it's the same thing with applications where it's like, if someone has like a pass rate of 85, that could be fine, right? And it doesn't mean that your app is like bad or unhealthy because it doesn't have a 100% pass rate. And I love that that's what OmniLens helps you to kind of like dig into.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that things will break. There is no such thing as a bug-free system. It's one of the testing principles. My job is to assure that we have found as many as we can in the areas we know of, right? And that's the reality of software. You can only do so much. So yeah, I totally agree. It's about just enabling you to feel confident and comfortable with what you're doing and to manage that risk, that's super important.
Yeah, definitely. So I love this. And you mentioned that you just did a complete rebrand of the website. You talked about wanting to have more integrations in OmniLens. What else do you have planned in the near future for OmniLens that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I think the biggest gap in the product, to be completely honest, is I don't enable you to create your own workflow. So a lot of open source repos will look at OmniLens and say, well, I don't have a workflow, so it's not going to help me, right? And I don't want that to be the case. So there's going to be a lot of work coming up the next few quarters around enabling you to build your first workflow. And whether it's a build workflow or a test workflow, unit test, I want to enable you to say, I'm invested in the quality of my application. OmniLens is going to enable me to do that. And from there, it's just using the product to help you understand why things have degraded and that kind of stuff. That's the big thing. The other big thing is that we don't currently support private repos. That is something that I do want to build in as well. And there are a number of pro features that I want to roll out as well that can really add value to users that want to use this every day. This is very much focused at an open source level, but I do see a use case where corporates can use this product to get an overview of their entire system from a GitHub health perspective. So lots of opportunities, lots of things coming.
Yeah, I love that. And how can people contribute, right? So if someone wants to add a PR, follow you on socials, how can we contribute to that?
Yeah, so OmniLens on Twitter, Chris ZUCH. I'm sorry, my surname is difficult, but you'll find me. But yeah, the repo's open source. You're ready to go. If you want to help build features, hit me a DM. I will be setting up a Discord server in the next few days so that people can really jump in and help out.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I can sit here and build everything, but I think this is a great project for people who want to start learning how to develop, and I'm willing to allow an influx of PRs of that kind, So yeah, just reach out to me and we can help you get started. Fun fact, OmniLens is completely self-hosted. So if you want to spin it up locally and run it locally by yourself, docs are there, feel free to go for it. So yeah, we're set up for people to contribute.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I did not know that, and that's amazing.
I completely forgot until now.
Oh no, that's perfect. No, I love it. I also love that you're setting up a Discord server. I think, again, the community aspect of building is so beautiful. And yes, you are very active on X or Twitter. So I highly encourage people to follow you there and to follow OmniLens. Yeah. And then we always ask folks this question. I think it's a great way to close out. But what is your favorite dessert?
Oh man, I forgot to prepare for this.
Oh.
It's cheesecake. I would say cheesecake has stolen my heart recently. I used to be a chocolate cake guy until my girlfriend was like, try this cheesecake, and my life has never been the same. So I'm going to go with a nice cheesecake. And you know what? If it's a chocolate cheesecake, even better.
Yeah, and those exist. Like a chocolate basket cheesecake is top tier.
They do.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's always so interesting hearing people's favorite desserts. And yeah, I thank you so much for coming and sharing about OmniLens and your perspective on QA, especially in this new AI agentic driven world. And yeah, Chris, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks. Awesome.